Welcome to Ideas Citizen. I'm Jackie DeMonis, and today we're talking about retirement, specifically what that experience looks like for C-suite executives. Leslie, Leanne, can you please give the listeners a little background to who you are?
Sure. My name is Leslie Braxic, and I am the co-founder and senior partner of My Next Season. Prior to that, I led a consulting firm for 21 years that focused on strategy execution, which is what led me to be in this next season transition space, because I was doing a lot with C-suite succession, leadership development, and had the recognition that when people didn't have a plan for what they were going to do next, it made succession a lot more complicated and difficult and made things hard for them too.
Well, my name's Leanne Corrett, and Leslie is one of my angels, so I'm just going to say that. I had a brilliant career at the Boeing company where I retired after having run the defense, space, and security business for a number of years, and now I serve on a number of public boards, work with private equity companies. But where I get most of my fulfillment and enjoyment from is I actually am one of the advisors to Leslie's company, My Next Season, where I get to help people who, like me, are transitioning and changing their lives. And so it's super exciting.
How did you guys meet, and how did you get involved with one another?
I was going to let Leslie start because it was actually a cold call. She called me.
Well, we had the opportunity to work together when Leanne was transitioning out of Boeing. And so one of the things that Boeing wanted to make sure of is that they took care of their top people that had devoted themselves unwaveringly to the company as a way of appreciating them and thanking them and supporting them at this time of transition in their careers. So I had the honor of being able to work with Leanne, who was so distinguished, and she's greatly underrepresented the significance of her career success. So it was a real honor for me to work with her and to help her really discern what she wanted to do next. She had a lot of options. She had people that were interested in her, and it's a really important time to be reflective about what you want to do next. And she and I had the opportunity to do that work together.
Well, and I'll just add is that, when Leslie called, it's like we instantly connected. I mean, it was like two sisters, and she was a safe space because I will tell you, it doesn't matter how many years you plan this out, how many years you think about it, how much time and effort. There comes a point in time when reality hits and you're right in the middle of it, and all of a sudden you're feeling lost, and there's a grieving that goes along with it. The value that is immense in terms of helping people transition and think about what is next. But Leslie, as a human being, kind and genuine and a friend. And then we actually became friends. And so even after I was like out doing other stuff, we would email each other and we'd call each other because we laugh a lot. And it was just really exciting because about a year after I was actually out, she said, would you like to maybe try advising some clients? And I was like, oh my gosh, really? And so it was super great because it just added another layer of wonderfulness to our relationship. But I treat her like the boss. I do treat her like the boss. I'm very respectful. So when I'm texting her, it's like, okay, this is like boss thing. And then it's like, no, this is like not boss thing.
Well, sometimes it's nice to have somebody just tell you what to do. You're like, thank you. Okay, can I just not make this decision? Could somebody else just take the reins? We talked about this a little bit via email, but we're using terminology different. So let's talk about it a little bit. So I say retirement. I think of retirement. You both are you're thinking more My Next Season. So can either of you talk about the difference or how you make that distinction between the two?
Yeah, Leanne, why don't you start?
Well, okay, I'm going to use an example. So I was early in my career on a commercial flight, and there was a lady who was so old. I mean, she had to be at least my age now, if not at least 10 years younger, but she looked like, because, everybody's in 30 looks like, they're gone. And she's trying to get it under the seat and put her luggage out. And I thought to myself, and I'm not lying, Jackie, thought to myself, oh my God, if I am still traveling like this and living this life at 50, just shoot me. Because, I grew up in a generation which was in your mid to late 50s, you're quote retiring. I mean, you're not going to be working anymore. And I'll be honest. I mean, I think our 50s today are like our 30s were 20 years ago. When I look at where my life is versus where my mom was at her time at this age, it's just completely different. And so one of the big helps for me was thinking about what does next look like. And it actually included erasing the word retirement from my vocabulary because it's actually a negative word that implies you're like on this death march, which we're really not on. Okay, this is like, remember when we were in college and we were all graduating and we could go buy clothes and we'd get a car and we had the world was like at our feet, right? But we had no money. This is like graduating from college with money. It's like the world is, the world is ours, but now we have the resources to do more with it.
No, I think it's such a great way to frame it because and the reason we call it next season is I think what we've realized is that life is just composed of different seasons. And those seasons are triggered by sometimes events under our control and sometimes events not under our control. So increasingly companies have been determining the time frame for when executives should transition out of the company. Maybe they've got a successor ready, maybe they're changing the strategy, maybe they just want to lower their cost, right? Because these executives, and they can bring somebody in at sort of a lower salary. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but nonetheless, two or three decades ago, an individual would say, I think I'm going to retire when I'm X and have control over that. But today it doesn't work that way in big companies. They're playing a bigger hand on deciding the timeline of when executives should retire from the company, but that doesn't mean the individual is ready to retire from life or from a career or from making an impact or continuing to learn and grow and evolve their identity. So we don't call it the R word, which for us is like a swear word. It doesn't really mean anything anymore because most of us, if we had parents who retired, like they kicked back, it was a slow down period, and frankly, they weren't living as long. But I think, people are retiring, are transitioning out of their big corporate jobs earlier. Our lifespan expectancy is longer, but there's energy and enthusiasm and a desire to continue to make an impact. So we don't love the word because for us, it really is about a next phase, a next season. I've seen people play off the words refirement or, just different like plays on the word, but we like next season because the other thing we've learned is sometimes a next season's triggered by a change in health or a change in a family member's health, that requires you, or a change in the status of your child, or those next seasons that are huge phases of transition in your life are often triggered by being an empty nester or the loss of somebody that you love or a change in your financial stability or a company merger or, there's all kinds of things that trigger a next season.
This is fascinating. I never I'm not at that point. I'm not in the C-suites. I didn't consider a number of these different things, but what I'm getting from this too is that, yes, we're talking about kind of these transitions for people that are top executives and everything, but it sounds also like a number of these things are I think common or not common, but can be, I think people can find similarities to their own lives and where they are and what they want out of life. And just kind of like what am I doing this for? Depending on what the job is, depending on what the goals are, depending on like what life situation may prove. Leanne, for your situation, when you were thinking about retirement, say in your earlier career versus later career, like did it look different? And then Leslie, for you, I feel like you have the beauty of seeing these experiences with like so many different people. Did it look different from when you initially thought it would, what that would initially look like to what it ended up actually looking like?
In my earlier life, what I thought it looked like, which was what my parents did. I mean, and Leslie made that point. It didn't matter whether it was an extended family member or not. Those who could usually were, we quote, retired and either playing golf or doing hobbies and traveling. But for the most part, their lives, they no longer were involved in the business community writ large. The people I grew up around. That time ended, and then it was kind of like this countdown to what is next. I mean, I remember my mom getting a car. She must have been in her mid 50s, and my dad said to her, "This is the last car you'll ever own. It'll be the last new car we buy." And I'm like, "What are you guys talking about? Not you're dying."
That's so sad.
And by the way, it wasn't, but it got to that whole mindset of there's this, it's the beginning of the last. I really think how I had grown up, and then as time moved on, and my sense of energy and what I like to do and how I like to be out there, this is just the second season of my life. I mean, that my education in my first 35 years at the company, which were an amazing gift and a blessing, I saw and did things I never would have expected. That was just the building block for what I'm doing now, and this is going to be another really great period. And honestly, had I stayed in that first phase, I and I I would have missed out on so much. I truly would have. I really gained an appreciation for what the art of the possible is.
I love that terminology, art of the possible. That's fun. That's empowering.
There's a George Eliot quote that we love, and it's, you're never too old to be who you might have been. So many people uncover things that they love even more than their primary career, because they redefine what their gifts are, what their superpowers are. So you may have been an accountant or a tax specialist or a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher, but maybe what you really are is great with people and a wonderful problem solver, and you're really a great public speaker. You're great at teaching people. You're great at mentoring people. You're great at solving problems. You bring a calmness to complexity and stress. These are things that are superpowers that each of us have in different ways, and if you apply those to new issues or problems, you can really make a difference. We have the former CFO of one of the top 10 banks went on to provide leadership at Habitat for Humanity. So his knowledge of finance and investment, supply chain, large scale intervention is invaluable. Or when people go, and we have another client who went to work at one of the largest food banks and completely redefined their system for supply and distribution. And, so it's bringing those superpowers to new issues and really creating new possibilities, to Leanne's point. So we love helping people figure out what their next season should be, because they tap into things about themselves that they've either ignored or that have been left dormant while they've been serving the needs of their employer in such a dedicated fashion for so long.
Leslie, I feel you do have such a interesting vantage point with the amount of people that you work with. So have you noticed, are there any sort of common threads that you're noticing when people are moving into that stage of life that maybe they're unique specifically to people in executive level positions more than, say, I want to say everyday people going into retirement, but I'm just curious. I'm like, is there a difference? Is there something specific that executives have to kind of contend with?
Yes, I think there are really, several things. One is to have been a Leanne or somebody that operated at that senior level in such a big, highly responsible role, large company. You've given up an awful lot. So you have probably given up your hobbies because you didn't have time to do them. You gave up your favorite nonprofit boards because you missed too many meetings. For those people who have children, they have probably taxed their relationships because they've missed a lot of games and meets and performances, birthday parties, and so on. They're taking conference calls on vacations. They are probably eating out too much and drinking too much.
Health.
And they're crossing, right, so they've compromised their health. They probably are too exhausted to stay with their workout schedules as much as they should, and on and on. So there is, and just to do the job. So I used to meet spouses of executives, that I would coach earlier in my career, and they would say, so-and-so is a workaholic. And I would always educate the spouse and say, they don't have a choice. To perform at the level that they are expected to perform at in the size and complexity of the job they have, they don't have a choice. So, but that is not without cost. There's a lot of cost to that. So now that individual is told maybe 1, 2, 3 years ahead, 6 months of when they thought, we're going to be transitioning you because we have so-and-so who's ready to move into that position, or we're going to consolidate roles, or we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And all of a sudden that person goes, right, and they look to what they have that they might do, and there's a huge void there because they've given up the hobbies. They probably haven't kept up with close friendships. They've had time for work and family, and that's probably about it.
And
So,
barely at that, to your point.
and barely at that, yeah. And so it's a huge sacrifice, a huge gift. So part of why we look to the companies to provide the support for the individuals is out of gratitude and out of recognition and out of respect for all that they've given while they've been in these big jobs. So, and what we find is that lower in the organization, it's less of an issue. They are able to generally maintain a little bit better balance. There isn't sort of the extraordinary. It's not that they don't work hard or contribute. They absolutely do. But it doesn't get so disproportionate as it does at the executive levels.
Leanne, was there ever going to be a good time for you to decide or for that transition to happen? Like, do you feel like you needed more time, or like is it a year in advance? Is it 6 months? If things were perfect, what should it look like, and what does it actually end up looking like? And I feel like, Leslie, you're going to have a different perspective on this, and with the various different people that you've worked with.
Well, I'll answer the question this way, in that I don't know my situation. I know friends of my situations. It's a very small community. We all know each other, different things like this, whether it's at my company or other companies. And it doesn't matter how much time and preparation you have. Things that we need to work through, the bios and the resumes, and thinking about what you're going to do or thinking about what you're not going to do. But there's a moment in time when reality hits that you're no longer part of the team. My moment occurred sitting in my closet when I looked at my calendar and I realized I no longer had any meetings. I no longer was getting any phone calls, and I was sobbing on the floor of my closet, and I did not know how I was going to get up. And my husband came in and he was like, "What is going on? Like, this should be like a joyous moment, like we can like go somewhere, do something." And I said, "This is worse than when I was diagnosed with cancer." I actually said those words.
Everything
And
you
he
knew to
got
be
really mad.
true was no more. It was like this. It's just, to
It's
your
a
point, ripped
wall. And
away.
I just gone. And you realize that people have already moved on. Once announcements are made, once celebrations occur, people move on, and that's the natural order. And you reflect back on all the transitions you watched, or perhaps you were the person that was taking the new role, and you realize you did the exact same thing, but it's the first time it ever happens to you. And this is why Leslie will always be my angel, and why my next season is so fundamentally important to me, to supporting this conversation. Because every one of us, regardless of our age, regardless of the situation, regardless if it's a transition, quote, retirement, a job layoff, a reduction in force, we all have that one moment where, whether you're in my closet or not, all of a sudden you realize it's just you. And that's when you need the support and the network and the tools to kind of pick yourself up and realize this is the beginning of whatever is next. And so I just think that's a really important conversation to have. And it's something that I think we all kind of underestimate the complexity of. Leslie, what would you say?
Yeah, I think you said it so well. It's you feel as though your identity is gone, and you worry that your relevance to the world is gone. And when you don't have a plan for what's next, all you have is what you've lost and what's in the rearview mirror. And it's frightening. It's really frightening because you don't know who you are, and you don't know how you're going to spend your time. Your structure for routines and all the ways in which you brought value and created value and did everything that you knew to do well is gone. And that's why it is so important to, it's amazing because we're trained to think about financially our next season, and to prepare for that, and to think about that, and retirement planning, and there's all these structures in place to make sure that we save well enough and we project out. But at no time do we ask ourselves the same question: how do I want to spend my time? What is it that I want to focus on? What brings me joy? Where do I feel happiest? Because if we were to really get inside Leanne's brain, right, keep me honest here, she would say, I kind of hated that part of my job. If I could have dissected these pieces out, they could go away. They were no longer interesting to me, or maybe I just didn't enjoy them anymore. but I love this and I would choose to do more of that. And so like in someone like Leanne, like this huge brain, huge powerful position, there may be things that were very small in her world that she loved most of all. Maybe it was mentoring young women, or maybe it was visiting her alma mater and speaking to future graduates. Like in terms of really what like made her heart go pitter patter and got her excited. So if we explore those things, that like what do you really love? Like what brings you joy? Because those meetings and some of those budgets and some of those presentations to the board, she's like amazing at them, but maybe it's uninteresting. She's been doing it for decades. But maybe her, at this stage and age, she finds these other nuances, these what seemingly smaller things, like so much fun. Imagine a world where she could do more of that and didn't have to do the stuff she didn't enjoy anymore. So that's the possibilities, and what we encourage clients to really think about is to be honest with yourself about the things that you just don't enjoy anymore, or they don't bring you purpose or fulfillment. But there's other things that do, and to help begin to sort through those thoughts.
Jackie, something Leslie said that I think is super important is it's about being intellectually honest with yourself. So they've developed a set of tools that you use that you answer questions. And like many of us, I'll be honest, sometimes we answer questions with the way we want the answer to turn out.
Ding, ding, ding. Right?
I'll guarantee you, I'm the first person who said, I really want to be known as this, so I'm answering all these questions like this, versus like, nobody's ever going to see this piece of paper. It's just for me, but like, what am I really glad that I'm not doing? So I'll be honest, one of the things I'm really glad that I don't do at the pace I did is I really hated traveling on Sundays. Oh my God. I mean, like I hate it ruins your weekend. I hated Sundays. It's a whole thing. And so in that conversation, that actually has implications in terms of what all I want to do next. Can I do it from where I am, or do I have to leave home every Sunday? Because that's what I did for 35 years. And so it's super important to be intellectually honest, and you have to have someone to do that with who isn't judgmental and who's going to respect the fact that you're going to answer the questions the way you want to answer them, not the way, quote, you should answer, which is what we've done in our corporate world the entire time.
Yeah. I'm getting from this, I mean, it's like it's honest reflection. It's like really honest reflection. Like if you have nobody to, to answer to, and let's be honest, like at the point that you're retiring, like who do you really have to answer to except for yourself at the end of the day? It's like if you've been doing things in a manner that you didn't necessarily want to do, this is your opportunity too. Like you could have done it sooner, but you didn't. Fine, whatever. But like you still have an opportunity for whatever that may be. Like that absolutely resonates with me. What would be like, I guess, okay, so I'm getting from this honest reflection, really like thinking through like what would going into this stage in life look like if you don't do it right? I mean, how can it go wrong?
Things that we see often, Jackie, is, which I think is probably one of the biggest mistakes we see, is that in response to all the stuff Leanne described and the concerns about not being relevant and maybe not having an identity, is people jump too quickly to have something to attach themselves to. And so they worry that if they don't say yes, that there won't be another opportunity. So even though it's not exactly what they want, they jump because they want to have something. So
Scarcity mindset.
I think, yeah, it really is. And they just want to have something. It's something, they go to church, synagogue, country club, family reunion, dinner with friends, and the question is, so what are you going to do next?
God,
now that you're retired,
that
what are
feels
you going to
slightly
do?
inappropriate, right?
No, it's like congratulations on your retirement. What are you going to do with your time? What are you going to do next? It's kind-hearted in the inquiry, right? Because I read about your retirement. I heard about it. So and so told me. What are you going to do with your time? Like it's a natural question, but it is a very stressful question to
So
receive.
hard. So hard. It's like,
Right.
and Leslie will say, I mean, she knows, it was like, like my greatest fear is when you ask me to introduce myself, what do I say? Because I used to have a title with,
Yeah.
and now it's like, I'm Leanne, and I have to be real, I've gone very comfortable saying, I'm Leanne. But Leslie knows that was like the most dreaded question to me in the world.
I believe it. I believe.
Actually, we just have them, develop talking points because you also, frankly, want to shut down the asker.
Yeah.
So if you
What do you say?
right, because if you say, I'm not sure, or I'm going to figure it out, it unleashes a litany of shoulds. Well, here's
Oof.
what I think you should do. You should, have
Thank you for
so-and-so
the
down the road
unsolicited
or
advice.
Right. But we always say there's no place for should. So the way you can do it is to just have your answer ready, right? Is to say, I'm thinking about this, or I'm exploring this, or I'm talking to a few people about this. So have an answer that also shuts down the conversation, because in truth, you're just trying to figure it out. But you're not really ready to share that with people. But the flip side is people sort of get panicky and they say yes to something, that they later regret.
Well, and I think, Leslie, that's something that you were super helpful to me because I had that same moment. I have such a full schedule, 65, it was always on. And so that that gap in timing, and that's the other lovely thing about the help that My Next Season provides, in that it isn't just up to the date of like you're transitioning out and then everybody just disappears. So it's even more compounded. The way Leslie and the team structure it is that you have these ongoing relationships, and it's up to you and the people you're working with to whether you can tend to continue to nurture it or not. And so you have this opportunity to have someone who can help you, or at least ask you some questions to say, are you sure this is what you want to do right now? And to challenge your thinking. And having your thinking challenged is really important in this stage.
I'll share with you a story that, actually two stories if I might. One is personal to me that probably could be relatable to many. I took a sabbatical from my career of consulting, and for years the newsprint catalog would come from the YMCA, which was a mile from my house. And I used to flip open. It had these amazing classes and workout schedule. And I thought, someday I'm going to be able to take a 10 o'clock on Tuesday, Thursday class. I can't wait, right? Really, I would just sit and say, someday when I retire, whatever I'm going to, I'm going to get to take that Tuesday, Thursday, 10 a.m. class. And it's going to be, because there's nothing offered late at night and I had small children, so weekends weren't really an option. So I was getting ready for my sabbatical. I couldn't wait for the latest, catalog to come out.
Yeah, you're like, I'm going to sign them up all these things.
I was so excited, and I went to register for it, and I realized I couldn't do it. And the reason I couldn't do it is, unbeknownst to me, the thing I most needed the sabbatical from was my Outlook calendar. I found myself that the thing I really was the most stressed by, and the thing, it wasn't the work content, but this idea that I had to be anywhere, at a set time. You lose complete control of your calendar and how you spend your time when you're working at these senior levels of companies. And I realized that, so I took a sabbatical to just catch my breath and just kind of regroup before I went on. But I realized, unbeknownst to me, back to Leanne's advice about really being honest with yourself, that I guess what I really needed the break from was my schedule, was just this being programmed to be anywhere doing anything. So I still got in the best shape of my life in those 6 months of sabbatical, but I didn't do it the way I thought I would, because the idea of being adherent to a calendar or a schedule was so aversive to me that I really sought flexibility. So in terms of what was reinforcing to me, it was actually that I didn't have to follow a calendar that was imposed by some other sort of structure. So just as an example of that, you're not always aware of what it is that's stress producing for you in your job. You think it's the job, but then when you separate from the job, you realize it wasn't the work, it was the structure of the work, and that I had no say over how I spent my time, because I had an assistant that was booking me out from 7 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, Anyway, but my second example I wanted to share with you is we have an exercise in our workbook called the What Bugs Me list. And so part of what we ask people to identify is what bugs you? Like, what bugs you in life? Like, when you walk by a homeless person, does it just stir your heart that person doesn't have a warm bed or a place to sleep? When you see it snowing in Texas and July, whatever, does that just trouble you. Climate, right? Climate is just, it just bugs me that we're just, or food security, or interruptions of electricity provision. I mean, whatever the it is, right? Like, what is it that really bugs you, that if you could wave your magic wand and fix it, you would fix it? That's just the thing that gets under your skin. It troubles you. You lose sleep over it. How could this be happening in our country and in our world? So I was working with a client, Doug Parker. He's the chairman and CEO of American Airlines. And so we were doing that exercise together. And he had a lot of offers. He was young. He was mid-50s. He had a lot of offers to go lead another company, to be on boards. He was is a very highly respected leader and in every way, and was very sought after. But, he was trying, I don't want to just do the same thing I've been doing. So it wasn't until we got to the what bugs me list, and I said, we were working through that, and he said, what bugs me? I'll tell you what bugs me. He said, it bugs me that there aren't more commercial pilots of color. Less than 3% of all commercial pilots are persons of color. You don't even need to have a college degree to be a commercial pilot. You need about $100,000. Who knew? He said you need about $100,000 to get a pilot's license. But once you do, inside of 10 years, you'll be a millionaire. There's a very structured career pathway for commercial pilots. He said if we had more pilots of color, it would change the economic landscape of our whole country. It would have a significant impact. We wrote it up as a white paper, and he took it to a white paper and a business plan. But, 3 years later, he launched Breaking Down Barriers. So if you look at breakingdownbarriers.org, a nonprofit who's devoted to this cause. He went and hired the former head of pilot training at United Airlines. She's the CEO of Breaking Down Barriers.
Wow.
He partnered with the Obama Foundation to get STEM assessment testing. They're going into inner cities. They're finding these kids, using a STEM assessment tool to see who has aptitude to become a pilot. And I think they've just had their third graduating class, in terms of for pilot training. So they will impact that in his lifetime.
You'll change the world.
Goosebumps actively right now. I'm like, I love it. That's a beautiful sentiment.
And he put life's experiences and brought a team together to make that happen. And so he took an idea, and he will change the world because of his idea. And what I think is really important is, had he not had some of those conversations with Leslie and the team, he likely still would have done it, but maybe on a different timeline or maybe in a different way. And so this is where having that network and having that support is so critical.
Absolutely. What a great opportunity to call some of those favors. It's not about the money anymore. It's really about the impact.
Yeah, we have a colleague, and he was the head of engineering, the head of an engineering organization when he retired from ExxonMobil. He was doing a mission over in Ghana with his church, and the thing he realized was that there was no electricity in this village. So as soon as the sun went down, the children couldn't learn anymore. People couldn't read. There was really, little to no activity that they were able to do at nighttime. And so he thought, if there was a way to bring light power to this village, then kids could continue to learn and things could happen sort of differently in the nighttime. So he came back and he developed a rechargeable lanterns that it could be distributed to the village, so then they would have light at nighttime and they could read at night and they could finish their schooling and do a number of things. So the challenge became, there's not electricity there, so how do they regenerate or recharge those? So he built a playground, a merry-go-round, and so the children going on the merry-go-round generated electricity that they used to recharge the light that were then used to light the village. But I think, they went then village by village throughout Ghana, and he took his engineering expertise, his heart for, helping others that were underserved, and made it fun, for the kids. And the first time they built the first playground, there was like 50 kids, that were going on the playground, but that's how they created the power and the energy to relight the lanterns. So, and he went on from there to do all kinds of more advanced things in those communities. But he really took his core expertise of engineering to, societal need or a problem, and it made a huge impact.
Let me ask you this. I mean, whether it be through people that you've worked with, Leslie, or even, Leanne with your network, are there people that just are like, I'm not going to retire? And maybe these exercises come to that where it's like, no, I'm just going to go, I don't know, get hired somewhere else. And maybe you're not a part of their succession plan. Maybe you go in as like a fractional, whatever it may be. Does that happen often, or is it, or more oftentimes it's like, no, I'm going kind of down a different path?
And do you want to respond?
Oh, I'll start. Well, and Leslie and I had these conversations, and my husband and I have these conversations on our walks, because walks are where we make all major life decisions, which is, if the right opportunity came along, would I go do another gig? The answer is maybe. I mean, it was a most assuredly yes a couple of years ago. I have found incredible joy and enjoying so much of what I'm doing now. I don't know if it's as much of a yes as it was, but I think for many of us, we don't rule it out, because you just don't, I always share with folks, it's easier to say what you won't do than to say what you will do, because the world is your oyster and there's so many things you will do. So I have a small list of won'ts that I don't want to do. And what I find with the clients and just friends in general is very similar, is we're all open to whatever is next. We may have a few don'ts just because of life situations and circumstances, but there's no rules. And that's what's so exciting. There's really no expectation placed on any of us. It's freedom of navigation. We can do what we want to do if we're blessed in that way.
Yeah, if you think of it, Jackie, is we have an exercise that we have the clients do that's using a pie chart. But if you were to have done Leanne's pie chart in her big job, right, Boeing would have been the big dominant piece, and Steve, her husband, and the dogs would be like a little small piece. And she probably did a lot of other things in another small sliver, took care of her health and, friendships and so on. But now Leanne's pie has many more slices to it. It's more of a portfolio of things that she's doing, her corporate boards, her advising of clients, her work with Embry-Riddle, her alma mater and friends. She's even baking pies and entering them in contests. So, her life looks, and that's what we see more often than not, and that's what next season often looks like for people, is that they do many more things but in smaller pieces. So there's not this big, gigantic, dominant force that just overrules everything else. But we see a lot of clients that want to continue to work for a variety of reasons. Some haven't met the financial goals that they want. For others, it's just they just have that energy and that time and that drive, in that way. For some, it was an unfulfilling end of career in whatever job they had. So maybe they didn't get to do all the things they wanted to do from that platform, and they still want to be able to do more or solve more issues. So it's not uncommon for our clients to want to continue working in some capacity, but it's much like Leanne is still working. It's just different. It's not just this one huge, gigantic thing, but it's many other smaller slices.
Let me ask you about this too. Like, how does, I'm thinking about how to support people going through like this transition. I feel like I'm thinking about it through two different lenses. Is how do you, like, if it's, if you're part of an inner circle likely that knows about a transition coming, like how does, from the inner workings professionally, how does one support that? And then there's obviously going to be, oftentimes there's some points of where both those people are there, whatever that may look like. So how do you support those transitions professionally? And then also, like, as say somebody as part of somebody's personal life, how do you support them from like a personal relationship standpoint? I don't know if they're the same. I don't know if they're different, but I am curious.
It's such a good question. I think it sounds more promotional than I mean it, but, we wrote Revealing Your Next Season, the book available on Amazon, to be a tool that would help people through thinking through and working through transition. There's an appendix in the back there that's a workbook with the questions like we've been talking about. We really wanted to give people a blueprint for how to think about this when you might not have an advisor or you might not have someone to work with. So I think it's helpful to have a process, and we tried to give transparency to what, after 10 years of being in this space, what we see the process. But I think as a friend, family member, I think it starts with just empathy and understanding that there is loss before there's gain in almost all of life's transitions. I don't care if it's having a baby, which is a joyful event. There's a loss of freedom, flexibility, health, the ability to just go do things. There is loss before you get to experience the joy of what it means to have there's empty nesters, deaths, any sort of transition of life, moving to a new city. You've lost your friends, your familiarity, your comfort level, but it's going to be great, but no matter what it is, transitions often come with loss before there's gain. And it doesn't mean that you didn't want to move or you didn't want this child or that you didn't want to make that transition. It's just the reality of it. So I think the first thing is just bringing empathy and understanding that transitions are hard and that there's often loss before there's gain. I think secondly is just being a good listener and also being a little bit of a video. So you don't have to be the armchair psychologist, but reflecting back what you heard someone say is very powerful. I'll give you an example. I was working with a client friend. His name was Bill, and I said, well, what are you thinking you're going to do next? He goes, oh, I've got it all figured out. I think I'm going to go on a few corporate boards. My wife and I are building a house, a vacation house that I want to finish. We're going to spend time there together, and I'm excited to get involved in some activities in our community. So I said, what I knew about Bill is that Bill hated meetings. He was an engineer by education, so I knew what frustrated him was sort of staying at a high level when he knew how to solve the problem, and that he really wanted control over his calendar, right? Because he wanted to have these long times. So I said, Bill, what I've heard you say and I repeated those three things, and I didn't need to say anything more. He goes, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. I don't want to go on corporate boards because what? Corporate boards mean you have to adhere to their calendar, their schedule, right? It doesn't matter, if it's interrupting your vacation sort of your time. You have to stay at an even higher level than if you're an executive, right? Because it's not your job to solve other people's problems, but to sort of, listen, govern. And so he ended up getting certified as an arbitration officer, is what in the end he sort of chose to do, and he takes the cases and does that on his own time. But the point is, I think that as a friend, you can listen. So when a friend says, gosh, I'm so tired of missing birthday parties because I have this job with global travel and my calendar, that when they say, hey, I have an opportunity to go do this big job in this company, and you say to them, hey, have you thought about the implications of that decision? Because I've heard you say traveling globally, it's hard to adjust with the time zone change. You've missed so many events with your kids that is that really the job you want? Or would you rather look for something that maybe doesn't require travel or that's part-time or whatever that is. So I think that's the other thing as a friend, is be a little bit of a really good listener, but being willing to sort of hold a mirror up.
Excellent point. And I think there's a way to tactfully say those things. I mean, I've had personal experiences where I've been griping about something and I come up with this brand new idea and they're like, just gently, I just want to remind you about whatever it was. I'm like, you know what? You are an excellent friend. Thank you so much. Yes, I will. And even if you don't respond immediately, it's like you take it, you think about it, and you're like, yes, these people know me well. I mean, and and they mean their best at the end of the day. So Leanne, did you, when you were making that transition or when that was queuing up, in terms of professionally, were there any ways that people supported you that you found that really resonated with you?
Well, what I found is obviously your family is super proud and excited of everything you've accomplished, and they're interested in what you're going to do next. Back to Leslie's point, that people start asking a lot of questions. And one of the things that I found is that I had a long list of everything that I wanted to do, to the point where I actually wrote it all down and I sent it to Leslie. And I was like, this is everything I want to do. And she's like, Maybe we should kind of like bucket some of these, or maybe we should look at how we're going to approach this a little differently. And what was helpful for me, and it's actually been helpful, is figuring out what of those things I really actually make me happy. And so there's a book called Strength to Strength, Albert Brooks. Is it Albert? I don't want to, you guys may have to, I mean, it's like over
Here,
there, but I
here,
can't.
let's look it up. Here, I'll tell you right now, and we can.
Arthur Brooks.
Arthur, is it Arthur Brooks? Thanks, Les. But he says something in his book that is profoundly important is, are you happy or did it make you feel special? And those are two very different things. And so for me, and this is part of the conversations I had with Leslie and with my husband, which is I liked feeling special, but that didn't necessarily mean that I was happy. And so what actually made me happy? And then being okay with that cookie cutter example of what I was supposed to be was evolving and changing. And it was okay if I didn't like doing certain things that everybody thought would be what I like to do. It's okay that I actually like putting a cake into a county fair to see if I could win, which by the way, I didn't win. And I have a real respect for people who cook and put bakery products into county fairs because
It's
I was
fun
like,
making
how
things
do you,
with your hands. It's great.
but it's just like there's a real appreciation for back to that authentic self in terms of what makes you happy, and then having people around you who listen. And Leslie was a great listener. She actually does a technique when she meets with people who are potential advisors, which I want to share because I think it's super important. She literally does this little demo where she comes onto the screen and she does this little thing. And then she says, what did you observe? And I know how I answered. I said, that person's really upset. I can tell they're really upset. They're having a horrible day. And she's like, well, this is actually what's happening. And it was not this person was having a really horrible day or was really upset about anything and it was, they were a little bit overwhelmed or whatever. But we're so quick to judge what people look like and we put our own selves onto other people's faces
Yes,
that we actually don't listen. That listening piece, regardless of whether you have a paid coach or not, having somebody that you can have real conversations with is so important.
absolutely.
True.
And I
So,
flunked that first test.
yeah.
You did.
Probably the first time you're like, oh my gosh, I failed something.
Or will it be the last? But that's okay.
Leslie, you've met with so many different people during these transitions and part of their lives. Would you say there's like a list of things that people should be doing to prepare for making these changes?
Definitely. We've come up with a sort of our top 10 list that we think really helps people to prepare. I mean, it starts with starting early. You almost can't start early enough. Be contemplative of what might I do next and really start to think about what brings me joy or, with whom should I make a connection with? I'll give you an example, Jackie. Sometimes people will say, I was invited by my alma mater to give a talk, but I was too busy. I don't have time for that. Or I was invited to sit on a panel at my industry conference, and I'm just too busy. I can't take the time away. But then when people are in transition, they go, oh man, I wish that I had done that because it would have given me more exposure, or I could have networked in with some new people, or I would have met people that now I wish I knew. So this whole idea, if you start early, then you make different decisions in those latter years of your career that help you set up for what you want to do next. So point number one is just starting early. Secondly is to really identify what your non-negotiables are as you begin to frame up your next season. So do I have a need for continued income? Or geographically, do I want to stay where I want to live or do I want to relocate? Do I have health concerns that obligate me to be, somewhere? Do I have caregiving responsibilities for children or for aging parents? Kind of what does your frame look like? Because as you start to think about what's next, you need to honor the things in your life that are important to you, and that you prioritize the honoring of those as you begin to put your plan together. Third, I would say, is to really focus on what gives you purpose. What brings you pride and joy and helps you, things that mean something to you, uniquely you. I had a client, she was a very high-ranking woman at Vanguard and, so brilliant financial mind. And the thing she most wanted to do in her next season was to learn how to quilt like her grandmother. Her 4 daughters had given her a sewing machine. She said it sat for 3 years. She got it for her 50th birthday. It's collecting dust in her closet. And her priority in all the range of possibilities, and she had many, was to learn how to quilt, create a quilt like her grandmother, but that was what was important to her. So that sort of non-negotiable things that just brought her joy and brought her purpose, was what she prioritized. 4 is just to be super intentional. There really are no shoulds in this next season. So just be intentional about things that are important to you and just close out the shoulds around you that tell you you should do this or you should do that. 5th is to widen your aperture. So most of us think of ourselves as with our professional title. I'm a teacher, I'm a lawyer, I'm a this, but you really so much more, as we've talked about earlier in the podcast, is just you're a problem solver, you're great with people, you are a problem solver, you're good with numbers, those sort of things. 6 is something that's super important that many people don't realize, is that you really need to rebrand yourself. Mm-hmm. And what we mean by that is that when you go to do something next, people don't always make the connection between what you were doing versus what you want to do. So I had a client, he was actually CEO of an insurance company, and he wanted to teach at his alma mater in his next season. And when he approached them about it, they said, oh, we don't really hire CEOs to teach. You could do a guest speaking talk on this, or you could, But when he came back and he's like, oh, Les, I got to come up with another plan. They said that I can't, I'm not really what they're looking for that. And I said, no, we just need to rebrand you. So we quickly ghost wrote some articles. We got them published in Fortune, Forbes, Investor Business Daily.
Good.
We wrote topics that he would lecture on. We redid his materials. He went out there and pitched himself as a faculty member, and he got a joint appointment in the College of Law and College of Business. But he had to rebrand himself, in a way that, they could digest and they could understand.
I'm almost surprised that he was going to take no as an answer anyway in that scenario. It's like, thanks for sharing, and we're not taking no.
Well, and they said yes, but they said you can be a guest speaker here and here. So they thought they said yes, but he's like, that's not what I wanted. I really wanted to teach a full class. But that rebranding is so important. We had a CFO who wanted to join a board, and the board said, I don't need a CFO. And he's like, I don't want to be your CFO. I just want to help, do this social cause. Anyway, this rebranding step, your bio, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, they all need to be updated, not based on who you were, but on what's the new point on your arrow. So the body of the arrow is the same, your career history, but the point, will go in a different direction depending on what you want to do next. 7 is one of those funny ones. Have a plan and be willing to change your plan. So we call it 100% structure and 100% flexibility. So you may have a plan to go forward and do something, and you may meet somebody that has something amazing, and it's okay to pivot, right? So, but waiting for the perfect thing isn't a plan. Go forward, try something, see if you like it, and be willing to pivot and change. So we just say have a plan and be willing to change your plan. 8 is remember your health is the rate limiter for everything you want to do in life. So just prioritize your health, and that's really all aspects of your health, your relationships and your physical health, your mental health. But without that, it really is the rate limiter for everything you want to do. 9 is really friendships matter, relationships matter. The longest longitudinal in existence on happiness, that the single most important variable for longevity is actually being in a caring relationship with another person. It doesn't even have to be a marriage, but if I care about you and you care about me, you would miss me if you didn't hear from me. I would miss you if I wasn't with you. So being in a relationship actually has a very direct relationship to our physical health also, but
absolutely.
But that's super important. And then the 10th is really just to really, honor your family, honor your heart, honor the things that are important to you, because at the end of the day, it's what matters the most. And when you're, reflecting and looking back on your life, the career will have been important, but the lives you touched and the people who touched you is really what matters the most. anticipate or plan for transitions, those would be kind of the top 10 I would.
I love it. I love it. It's a lot of, it's a feel good list. I like the list. It's practical, but there's something else to be said for like it being written down. It's like, okay, like here's some guiding principles to consider and think of. I love it. Leanne, would you add anything to
Good.
that?
The only element I would add is give yourself grace.
Yeah.
It's going to be perfectly imperfect this entire journey. And
Good.
you have to be okay that some days you're going to feel really great about yourself and some days it may be a little bit harder, or it's not moving as fast as you want it to, or people aren't responding at the pace that you're used to. And give yourself grace because you deserve it. And I find that those who give grace get grace. And so that's just super important.
Yeah,
Well
absolutely.
said.
Leslie, Leanne, you both are a wealth of knowledge. How can people find you or follow you online?
Can both be found by just our first name dot our last name at mynextseason.com. So I'm Leslie.Braksick at mynextseason.com, BRAKSICK. And Leanne is the same, Leanne, LEANNE .caret, CARET at mynextseason.com.
And we both have LinkedIn profiles and we're both really
Yep.
good at responding to that. And it'd be great to connect with folks.
Yeah, we would love that. We wrote Revealing Your Next Season to be a blueprint that helps people figure out what to do next and to find their way. And it's available on Amazon and has lots of good case examples and stories, and it's an easy read. So we hope that that's helpful to people too. And Leanne's
Absolutely.
story's in there, so spoiler alert, spoiler alert.
It's been so much fun.
Thank you both so much. It's been such a pleasure. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. Join the Idea Citizen LinkedIn group and share this episode with a friend.